Hello everybody, this is Alan Underwood with codingblocks.net, and in this video we're going to pick up where we left off in the previous one where we set up SQL Server in a Docker container. And in this video I'm going to show you how to get some data so you can actually start playing with these things and learn how to write these queries and understand how they go. So if we're ready, let's go ahead and jump in here. So the first thing I want to warn you of is the hardest part for anybody to get started with SQL Server is just, hey, I don't have any data, so I need to play with this. Here's the problem. If you type in SQL Server sample data, what you're going to see is this SQL samples come up, and it's in the docs, and it's going to point you to the SQL Server GitHub repository with samples. And the problem is none of this is just download and go. A lot of this are tutorials on how to, link up to an existing database to load one up. Like, it's just a lot of work. So rather than all that, what I want you to search for is Contoso sample BI database. And I'll have a link in the notes below this video so that you can just go to it. And don't worry about the fact that this thing was made 9 years ago. Databases, at least SQL Server, and what we'll be learning here, the stuff hasn't changed that much. Sure, a lot of the language around it has evolved, but the database, tables, views, all that kind of stuff, they're all basically the same. So if you come here and let's say download, I do not want this ABF file. That is basically the analysis services database. We're only working in SQL Server in terms of relational database systems here. So I'm just going to download this bidemo.back. So I'm going to hit next. This thing should start downloading, and we'll resume here in a second. It doesn't take that long, but don't want to make you sit through it. Okay, I now have this thing downloaded, and I've put it in my development MS SQL tips directory. We're going to go ahead and run this thing. And actually, before we go forward with this, I'm going to click up here and copy this because this is more or less just a WinZip, unzip thing. And it would have gone to my temp directory. I don't want that. I want it to go into the same directory where I've got it right here. Let's unzip it. And there we go. We have 2 files. So here's the thing that you're going to be looking at here. They were nice enough to give us the backup of the database and then also this data dictionary. And we'll take a look at this thing. I mean, I'm not going to spend much time going through here, but this is, this is for a data warehouse, and these are dimensions, and it will basically tell you information about this database, right? So if you want to look at that, fine. I will not be looking at that much because I'd rather look through the database and see what's going on. So with that said, now it's time to have some fun. So last time, actually, I kind of need to find out where we were. So as we mentioned last time, we've got Docker Desktop up and running, right? And again, we want this in Linux container mode, which we are because it's saying, hey, you want to switch to Windows container. So that's good. And if I remember right, this is the one that we had. So what I'm going to do is I should still have the Docker command in here to run this thing, and I do. We're going to do the dev one. All right, so again, go back and watch the previous video if you want to see how to set all this stuff up. But more or less, I'm going to run a development server called sqldev. It'll be removed whenever it's done, like I stop it. I've accepted the EULA, my password, all this kind of stuff, right? So 1533 is where my development environment is going to be. So here we go. Conflict. Oh, apparently I already have one. So let's go ahead and kill these. Docker rm-f. So on the previous episode, on the previous video, I'd said that Docker rm removes a container. -f is just a nice way of being able to stop a container and remove it at the same time. So it force stops it before you remove it. So here I'm going to remove 7E25 and 7227. So I'm going to kill both of those. All right, so now if I do a docker ps-a, they're all gone. So that's excellent. So let's go ahead and run this thing now. So it's starting up. Now, what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and open up SQL Server Management Studio. And I really need to upgrade to 18 because, like I mentioned in the previous video, it's free. Download it, use it. So I probably need to do that here at some point. So 1533 we said was the one. I'm going to connect to it. And so here we can see that I don't have any regular databases, right? And that's where we left off last time. And we want to get some data in there. So what we're going to do is we need to get this backup into the container, all right? So I'm going to show you a useful way of doing this that's really nice. So right now I'm in the directory where this is. So if I do an ls-al, we can see that I have this backup file in here. What I want to do is I want to copy this file from my system and put it into the container. So I'm going to do a docker cp, so that's copy, and then I'm going to say here, so in Windows, you've basically got to do the whole path out. If you're in Linux and you're doing this, then doing something like this is probably enough. So here, what I've got to do is, so that we don't have to type it all out, I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to do contoso retail dw.back. All right. Now, after that, you're going to do a colon, and I'm just going to put it into the root of this other container. All right. I want it at the very root file system level. And then that way I don't have to go find it. Oh, but I actually need to docker cp that. So space, I'm sorry, you don't do a colon here. We're going to do sqldev. So that's the name of the container that's running that we saw a little while ago per this, right? That's what we named it. And then I'm going to put it in the root. So I'm going to hit enter. Cannot find create file. What is that? I must have typed, I did type it wrong. All right, there we go. Not Contoso, it's Contoso. Let's try that again. So this will take a second because it's, not small. I want to say, yeah, so 645 megs. So it takes a second. All right, it's in there. Now what we want to do is we want to see if we can go find that thing, right? And here's the cool stuff. If we come in here to databases, I'm going to right click in SQL Server Management Studio and I'm going to say restore database. Now this isn't something already on the system, so I'm going to click device, hit the ellipsis over here, file, and hit add. Now look at this. This is pointing to, and for people who are used to Windows SQL Server, which is probably most everybody, this doesn't look like any kind of path you've ever seen, right? Like you're probably used to seeing C:\program files, Microsoft SQL Server, etc. Remember, we're running a Linux image, so this is a Linux type path. Well, we know that I put this in / not /var op ms SQL data, right? So let's see if we can get to the root and hit enter or refresh, and it doesn't want to let us. Okay, so, well, that stinks. What do we do now? Well, here's an easy way of going in and doing this. So I did this on purpose. So you could totally have known to copy that into that directory, but all's not lost. You don't need to go do another copy command. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do docker exec -it. So that means, hey, I want to run this command interactive. I'm going to do -u and tell it I want to use the root user because Linux, that's the most powerful user. And then I'm going to call sqldev and then bash. Bash is the shell. And I mentioned this on the previous one. I don't know why that went transparent. So I'm going to hit enter. We're in the container now, right? So this is the shell in the container. We can see we're running as root. Now, if I do an ls-al in here, we can see that we have this backup database in there. Okay, so all we need to do really is come back over here and let's find that path that they were saying that we have access to. So it's this. So I'm going to Control-C that. We're going to come back here, and in Linux, the command to move a file is mv. So we're going to mv contoso. I'm just going to, apparently I like to put that extra O. I'm going to hit tab, so it'll complete it for me. And then I'm going to paste this, and then that way it will move that file over to that directory. So if I do an ls, or if I do an ls in this folder again, that Contoso is gone. But if I do an ls, basically list the directory for this, there we go. So we can see that the file is there. Now, if we come back over to SQL Server Management Studio and I do a refresh, guess what shows up? Sweet, right? That's nice. So this is the super easy way to do this. I'm going to hit OK. That's all good. We're going to hit OK again. So it's going to go ahead and fill all this stuff in. Now, a couple of things that we probably want to do, say relocate all files to folder. Basically, this is going to say make sure that you keep the LDF, the MDF, and everything in that var opt MS SQL data folder, okay? Do that. It'll probably matter in the future. It won't so much for what I'm going to show you right now, but that's fine. We don't really need to do any of this stuff, but just know that those options are there. So here we are. This is all good. Now, one thing I want to show you real quick is none of this really matters here. What you do want to do though, and I showed this in the last one, this is one of the reasons I love SQL Server Management Studio, is I can get the command that it's going to run behind the scenes. So if I ever need to script this out and automate it later, I can do that. So I'm going to tell it to script this command to a new query editor window. Okay, so it created it behind the scenes for us, just the script, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. But for right now, let's go ahead and restore this thing. So everything looks good. We're going to hit OK, and we should see that it's restoring. So as soon as it's done, we'll get a prompt. Hey, beautiful, it's done. So if we go back over to SQL Server Management Studio, look, we have a database there, and we should have some tables. We do. Right? That's pretty awesome. So one of the things that's really nice about this is we can start querying things right now. So first, let's look at this. This is the script that I had it create behind the scenes for us. And you can see here, it's a restore database command. It's going to name the database this from disk. By the way, the reason I ended up doing it this way is I looked online for samples of how to do this, and there just weren't any good samples of how to set this restore statement up. So script it from the UI, and then that way you know exactly what it is, and it tells you where the location is. It says, hey, we are doing with the file. It's telling you to move this to the proper location. And it's telling them to move the log, the transaction log, to the proper location. No unload and stats equals 5. So that's awesome. We now have something. I'm going to go ahead and save this thing out. And I'm going to put it in C:users, Alan, documents, dev, MS SQL tips, right? So we're going to call this restore Contoso DW from backup.sql. All right, cool. So that thing's good. Now let's just so you can see some stuff. Let's do select star from, let's see, dbo.dem sales. I think they have several different things, but they have, maybe it was online. Fact online sales. And we don't actually want to do a select star. Let's do top 10 star from here. And I know some of these tables to play with because obviously I've messed with this before, but you have real orders, right? This particular database is modeled for a data warehouse. So you've got dimensions and facts and all that. Who cares, right? Like you can query this stuff and you can do regular SQL queries with it. The structure and the naming schema follows along data warehouse standards, and that might have evolved over time as well. But again, all we care about is querying some things and learning about the database system. So there's data here. And the reason I didn't do a select all from is if I do a select count star from dbo.fact, there's quite a few records in this table. And this is one of the reasons why I like this database, is because you can run into some real world problems by having plenty of data. So here we have 12,627,608 records, right? So that's excellent. That means that you guys can go, or everybody, sorry, I don't mean to say guys, girls, everybody can go in and play with things and run into real world problems. So on my desktop, you could probably chew through this because I got a pretty beefy processor. On a lower end laptop or not a high end laptop, you know, playing even with this amount of data could take some time, right? Here's the cool part, right? You now have a database you can go in and mess around with, and that's really nice. And you saw that the restore didn't take that much time, and that's great and all. But if I were to go now and say Docker, oh, actually, let's get out of here. So I think I mentioned in the last video to exit out of the shell from the Docker container, hold down Control and then do P and then Q, and then I'm back. And if I do a Docker ps-a, I'll see that this thing's still running, right? But here's the problem. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to say Docker, I'm going to down this thing, I'm going to delete it. I'm going to do an rm-f and I'm going to do sqldev. All right. And if I do that, first, if we come back here and we refresh this databases list, it's going to die. And I showed this last time because there's no server currently running, right? So let me go ahead and stop this. If it will, it won't, whatever. So here's the thing, right? When I start this back up right here, when it starts up, there will be no, it's so funny. I wonder if the new version of this doesn't do this. All right, so here we go. We're going to kill SQL Management Studio because it did not like. Oops. All right, so that's gone. Let's open it back up. Force killing is always the best way to do things, of course. I'm totally kidding. All right, so we're not going to recover the selected files. Don't really care about them. But we're going to connect back to this, right? We know that it's running because I just Docker upped it, but guess what's not there? The database is missing, right? So it would get a little bit tedious having to do this every time. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. You could totally do what I'm about to show you, and it would be totally fine. So here, let's go restore this again. And we haven't added it to the container yet, but I just want to get that path again. We're going to add a file. All right, so it's this, right? So this time we're going to be smart, right? We're going to Docker cp c:users allen documents dev ms SQL tips contoso retail. All right, so we're going to copy that into sqldev and then paste in this directory, right? We're going to move it over there. And then that way we don't have to go back into the container and do a move. I just wanted to show that previously so that you could learn a little bit more about how you can work with files. So if we go back over here, hit refresh, we have it. Doggone it. Docker ps-a docker rm-f d256. So I messed up. I actually wanted to show you something else. So Docker, let's go back to the command. What I wanted to show you was how you can do this without removing it. So I'm going to get rid of this -rm because that basically says, hey, when I stop the container, kill it, right? Delete it. So we're going to start it up without that this time. All right, and then we'll give it a second. Hopefully, let's hit cancel here, and we'll go back to SQL Management Studio. Let's refresh. It should still be alive. Okay, so it's alive because I didn't kill it and then try and reconnect. So let's do the restore. Oops, we're going to have to do this Docker CP again. We're going to copy it to the right directory. And should only take a couple seconds. After that's done, all right, so let's go back in here. Let's restore the database. So restore database. What? Restore database? Okay, let's disconnect from it because I don't think it liked that I just started it back up when it was dead. All right, let's try it now. Restore database. All right, much better. Device, I'm going to hit this. We're going to add the file. We've been through this dance before. Hit OK. OK. We're going to go to files. We're going to say relocate the files, and we're going to hit OK. All right. So this will recreate the database for us, and it's not terribly painful, but it's kind of annoying to have to do it every time, right? So we should have ourselves a nice database that we can come in and say select top 10 star from, what was it, fact online sales, right? Run that, we have data. Okay, excellent. So check this out. What if you just wanted to, I don't know, shut down your computer and come back later and work on it? You can totally do it. So what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to let this sit here and run and make you wait for it the whole time, because shutting down Docker actually takes some time, but we are going to quit Docker, all right? So this thing's going to do its thing, and you know it's working if it's got the little, things moving on the whale. But we're going to let that thing go, and then we'll come back in a second. Well, actually, it shut down quicker than usual. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start it back up. So Docker desktop, and we should see the whale pop up. And again, it's doing something because it's, got the little things going up and down there. I probably should have turned off Steam before I did this, but whatever. So we'll wait for that to come up. All right. So we're back. Docker desktop is running now. That's good news. But let's go take a look in here and see what's going on. So let's do docker ps-a. Again, I always use the -a. You can see that the status is it exited, right? But it's still there, but it's not running. So as we've done in the past here, let's go ahead and refresh this. It's going to die, and I'm not going to wait for it to die. It's basically going to take time, and it will be like, hey, I can't connect, right? So let's just go ahead and kill this because I'm impatient. Okay, so that's gone. Let's open it back up. We're not going to try and connect to anything yet because we know that it's not running. Here's the cool part. So what you can do is you can just start it back up. Docker start, and then you can either do the ID, so 78. I like to do the name because it makes more sense to me. So the name is sqldev, and it should be started back up. So if I do a docker ps-a again, look, here we go. It's up. It says it's running. And that's pretty fast. I don't know if you've ever started SQL Server before in the past. It never starts that quick. So look here. We're still back, right? We still have this stuff running. So that is one way that you can do this. And that's super nice because then you don't have to keep restoring this database, right? As long as you don't Docker RM this thing, basically remove the container completely, you can stop it, you can start it. So you can say docker stop and then sqldev and docker ps-a again, and you'll see that it's exited again. You can do that as many times as you want, either by shutting down Docker, restarting your system. It doesn't matter. You can keep doing those things, right? So I'm going to Docker start it again. And this time I'm going to do it by the image ID. And if we do a docker ps-a, again, it's up. So you can totally do that. It's amazing. Now, what you don't have here is if you were to go do something like, let's say that I want to, I'm trying to think of a good thing. Let's say that you want to create some sort of view, right? And we want to create a custom view. So I'm going to say create view dbo.allenView, because that's a great name for a view. Please don't ever do that. As, and I'm going to say select, I don't know, top 10 star from dbo.final, say, or what was it? Fact online sales. I'll remember this one day. Order by, I don't even know if you can do an order by in a view. This is one of those things that, who knows. Anyways, let's just do this. So I do that, I save it. Now my view, I have a view in here called Allen View. And if I say select star from Allen View, oops, wrong button, then we have data, right? So the view works. So here's the problem is, what if I want to save this stuff off somewhere? you don't really have access to this stuff anywhere outside of the container. So you could completely and totally do this. So I had mentioned earlier, you can do a docker exec -it to run an interactive -u root sqldev, and then we're going to say bash, right? So I can go in here and cd to change to var opt msql data, right? And if I do an ls in here, I could get these files out, right? So I could go back to the command line and I could say docker cp, and I could copy from inside the container over to my local file system. I could totally do that. But that's also kind of a pain in the butt. So the last thing I want to show you is this. So I'm going to control P, control Q. Let's get back to docker ls dash, or no, not ls, docker ps dash a. All right, so this thing's up. What we're going to do now is we're going to kill this. So I'm going to say docker rm dash f, and I'm going to say sqldev. So I want to kill it. I want to get rid of it. So docker ps dash a, nothing's there. So what I want to do this time is, you can see here, this is the same thing, right? Docker run, we have sqldev, got rid of the rm. This time, before we put this in here, I'm going to map a volume, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want a volume on my system, a file or a folder on my system to do this. Now, this is where the setting that I showed you before matters. So you go into settings for your Docker, and if you go into shared drives, you need to make sure that you have the drive checked where you plan on being able to map a folder from one place to another. In this case, I'm doing it from my C drive, so I don't have anything to change. But if I were going to do it on D, E, or Z, I would need to check that, hit apply, and it might restart Docker. But just know that if this doesn't work, you probably need to go look at that setting. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to call this contoso dev data, just for kicks, right? I mean, doesn't matter. So I'm going to take it from there, and then I have to do a colon. And here I'm going to say var, I believe it was var opt. Oh man. So var opt msql data, I think is where it was. I believe that was right. So we're going to do this, and if it fails, then I'll go back and look at it again. But this is basically saying, hey, I want to be able to see all the files on my system in this folder that exists in this folder. Okay, so if I hit enter, requires at least one argument. What did I do? Okay, I think I know what I need to do here. I need to get rid of these quotes around the edges here. So for whatever reason, it's not liking that I have not created this folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say mkdir and then contoso dev data. All right, so now I have a directory here that is contoso dev data. So I've seen this happen in the past where it would just create it for you automatically, but apparently it didn't like it. So now what we're going to do is, if you look at the command here, I have the -v, and then you'll see that I kept everything, and I don't know that this is going to work, but I kept everything in quotes. So I have my Windows path, and then colon, and then my Linux path, right? So map on my host to what's in the container. And if I hit enter, it should be starting up. And not ls. If I do a docker ps-a, now what we should see is this thing's running and I have sqldev, all right? But let's go over here and look at this folder. So contoso dev data, look, I have files in here. I didn't put these in here. I just created the directory. So this is doing exactly what we want. This is basically mapping a folder on your system to be able to look at a folder inside the container. So that's excellent. That's what we want. So what we're going to do here, and this is kind of interesting, is previously we were doing a docker cp to move this file in here. I'm just going to control C it from here and control V it into there. All right. So that's now in the container. And if you don't believe me, let's go ahead. I don't think we want to try and do that from the existing one. Let's connect to 1533 again. This time we're going to restore the database, and same song and dance again. File, add, look what's there. That's excellent. And click OK. Go back over to files. We're going to say relocate general. Now, real quick, all we see is Contoso retail DW, right? That's our backup file. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hit OK. It's going to start restoring, which will take a second. But we'll also see here's the MDF file, so that's our data file, and there's the LDF file, that's our transaction log file. So notice it takes a little bit longer than it did previously, and that's because now there is a live mapping from the container to your local data system. It's not terribly slow, but it definitely takes a little bit longer. So once this thing's done, here's the cool part. If I wanted to retain any changes that I do now, anything that I make in here, and we'll go test this out here in a second, but anything I make will alter the size of these things and they'll exist there. So anytime that we recreate and attach to that in the future, it'll be available. So let's come in here. We're attached to that database. Watch, this doesn't exist, right? Because it's not there anymore. If I create this and then I run it, it'll be there, okay? That's not that interesting. We don't really see anything growing here, but we can watch this grow pretty quick if I were to create an index on one of these big tables. So just for kicks, let's go in here to the tables and let's go find fact sales online or online sales. And we're gonna create an index on this table. It's only currently done by the sales key. Let's create a new index. We'll do it non-clustered. I like to kind of call mine IDX underscore and then something. So in this case, let's take a look at what we're going to put in here. So let's add, just for fun, sales amount. Let's do that one. And yeah, that's good. So we're going to do sales amount. And we are going to just, we'll stick with that. We're not going to go too complex. So here's sales amount. All right, let's look back over here. We're at 1.265 gigs, right? So once we hit this, we're going to hit OK. And we should see that this thing's going to start growing. And the reason it's going to grow is because indexes take up space. So this will take a minute because we saw there were millions of records in there last time, but you see this thing growing here now? We have access to the underlying file system, just as if you were running this as SQL Server on your system. You now can see all this stuff directly. So here's the key part that we'll see here in a second. And what this buys you, man, I really don't want to wait on this now, but we'll let this finish up. All right, so it's done. All right, cool. So if we just grew this database by, a little over 200 megs, fine, whatever. That's what indexes do. But here's the key part that I want to show you is in the past, what we did is we came in and we deleted this thing, right? Like basically we said, hey, as long as you just start and stop your container, you're fine. But if you RM it, it's gone, right? Well, look at this. So Docker ps-a, we have the thing running, it's up. I don't need to show you shutting it down. What I am going to do is I'm going to RM it this time though. So Docker rm-f sqldev. All right, so it should be no surprise that that container is not there anymore, right? But look, our folder is still there because what we did is we mapped a directory on our host, our server, our computer into that container. So even though the container is gone, this folder with the data that we had mapped inside that container is still there. So what we can do now is I'm going to go back and run this command here where I map in that same folder, that same volume, which is what -v stands for, is map a volume. And when I run this, here's the cool part. And this is where things get interesting for you when you start wanting to run multiple things. So let's disconnect this again so that we get a fresh copy of it. Connect it. And guess what's here? So the database is still there. And this view that we created last time, guess what? That thing's still there. So The point here is you have multiple ways that you can go about this. If you just want to do local dev and you want to be able to blow away things, I'll give you a couple of useful examples of when you might want to not map a volume. If you're doing penetration testing on a database, that is a perfect example of, hey, you have a starting point. You have a database that you want to test to make sure all your stored procedures are safe and whatever else is hitting it, right? And so you do some pen testing on that. It's going to trash your database if it finds any vulnerabilities, right? So that's a perfect example of where you want to just be able to blow it away and start fresh again, right? Excellent. There are other examples, like let's say that you have some migration scripts to go from V1 to V2 of your database, right? You want to test it. You want to make sure things that started at the beginning ended up the way that they needed to be in version 2. A lot of times you'll find a bug in your migration script, so it's nice to be able to start over without having to restore databases and do a bunch of copying of files around and all that, right? You just can do it and RM your container when you're done. Now, if you're doing active development on a database and you're making changes and you're going through it, that's a perfect example of where you might want to just, have this thing not RM every time and be able to run. And if you want to be able to come back to this thing in the future, toast Docker completely and stand it back up and map a volume, you can do that. So this is the prerequisites for what we're going to do in the next few videos. Hopefully this gets you to a pretty good starting point. Everything that I'm going to do in the upcoming videos are going to be in this Contoso Retail DW so that you can come along for the ride and you can try these things on your own, right? So you'll be able to do the queries positive and all that. So hopefully I've given you a better idea of why and how you can set up some data that you can play with and a decent size of data, right? Like this isn't tiny. So if you have any questions or anything, please leave them in the comments below. I'm going to try and paste some of these commands down in the notes so that you can just copy and paste them and you can look at the differences, because I know that like going to a video and trying to read back and forth, that can be a little bit frustrating. So, if you liked the video, please leave it a thumbs up because that does help us out. If you loved it, subscribe. I am definitely going to have more videos just like this in the future where I'm going to be walking you through SQL queries, like how to improve performance, how to see performance, all that kind of stuff. So again, if you love it, please do subscribe, share it with your friends. And if you like this content, go check out our podcast. We do tons of things on the podcast. So you can see that at codingblocks.net. So thank you for your time. This is Alan Underwood, and I'll be back soon.